The Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Dominion pulsed with grandeur and menace. Towering columns carved from obsidian crystal lined the chamber, shimmering faintly in the ambient violet light. Rows of alien warlords sat on thrones sculpted from the remains of conquered worlds, reptilian generals draped in scales of iridescent armor, commandants clicking nervously with mandibles twitching, and translucent spectral beings who hovered without form, exuding waves of cold authority. At the center of the hall, the supreme warlord rose. His presence was overwhelming, his plated body twice the height of the tallest warrior. He gestured, and a colossal holographic transmission formed before them, Earth, spinning slowly, vulnerable and alone. His voice echoed through the chamber, translated into thousands of dialects. To the inhabitants of Terra, this is the final decree. You will surrender all planetary resources, disband all military forces, and submit to the will of the Dominion. Resistance will result in your complete and total annihilation. You have standard hours. The message was broadcast across the stars, carried on quantum pulses to the edges of the Milky Way. It echoed through human satellites and communication arrays, ultimately arriving in the Earth's United Nations Command Center, a sleek underground complex carved beneath the Andes Mountains. Holographic projectors filled the air with the Dominion's transmission. Around the large, oval war table sat the most powerful leaders on Earth, presidents, prime ministers, generals, and diplomats. For a long moment, the room was silent. The ultimatum hung there, heavy with implied doom, suffocating the air. And then, slowly, a chuckle began. It came from General Shaw, sitting at the far end of the table. He leaned back, arms folded, and let the laugh build. Others joined. The French Prime Minister snorted into his coffee. The Brazilian President chuckled. The British Ambassador actually wiped away a tear. President Danielle Rowe leaned forward, her hands folded under her chin, her eyes twinkling with both amusement and steel. They think they're the first to try this, she said softly. A ripple of agreement murmured around the table. Throughout human history, they had faced invasions, not from the stars, but from empires, tyrants, and monsters of their own making. They had heard ultimatums before: surrender, yield, or perish. And every time, humanity had found a way not only to survive but to thrive. The difference this time was scale. But scale never mattered to humans. The bigger the threat, the bigger the fight. President Rowe turned toward the communication officer. Patch me through, she ordered. The tech nodded and brought up the direct transmission link. The Dominion's assembly hall suddenly flickered with life, the image of Earth's command center appearing in the center of their grand chamber. The supreme warlord straightened, prepared for a response of pleading, perhaps desperation. Instead, President Rowe leaned in, her expression calm, almost amused. On behalf of humanity, she said with perfect clarity, that's adorable. The transmission cut. The silence in the Dominion's grand hall was absolute. Not a single warlord spoke. The supreme warlord's multiple eyes narrowed. He had faced defiant species before, but never with this dismissive humor. It was as if the threat of total annihilation had been met with a pat on the head. In the depths of space, fleets of colossal warships sat paused, weapons humming, engines thrumming with power. Yet aboard every ship, the Dominion's warriors felt a strange chill. No species had ever responded like that. Not with defiance. Not with mockery. The supreme warlord clenched his clawed hand and dismissed the chamber. But the seed of doubt was planted. Back on Earth, laughter echoed in the command center. People clapped each other on the backs. Relief and courage spread like wildfire. The science advisor leaned in and whispered to the president, "Ma'am, you do know they have the firepower to turn us into vapor." President Rowe smiled. "Yes. But they don't know what happens when humanity is underestimated." Across the globe, military forces stood at alert. Scientists doubled down on insane experimental projects. Pilots ran drills with impossible maneuvers. Civilians stocked up on supplies and memes. The phrase, "that's adorable," was already trending across every network. T-shirts, banners, even drone light shows blazed the words across the night sky. In space, far above, the Dominion fleet prepared for what they assumed would be an easy conquest. But deep in their command structures, unease rippled. For in the face of overwhelming power, humanity had responded not with fear, but with a smirk. The Dominion fleet hung in orbit like a storm cloud, thousands of dreadnoughts bristling with weapons capable of vaporizing continents. From the flagship, the Supreme Warlord observed Earth's surface through magnified hollow displays. His command deck was a marvel of brute efficiency, filled with buzzing alien tacticians and cold, calculating artificial minds. Still, that seed of doubt remained. The human response had been unnerving, but arrogance demanded they press forward. He raised a clawed hand. "Commence aorbiter strikes on their defense platforms," he ordered. The sky above Earth lit up with energy lances, beams that cracked through the atmosphere with terrifying power. But before impact, every single strike was intercepted by shimmering, shifting barriers. On Earth's surface, hidden defense grids, long kept secret even from the public, activated. Massive satellites repositioned and countered the Dominion's fire with coordinated electromagnetic pulses, blinding some of their sensors. Energy absorbers redirected bursts of plasma into stored power cells. In Earth's Pacific Command bunker, General Shaw watched the data feeds flood in. "They're probing," he muttered. His Colonel Vasquez smirked. "Let them probe. The real surprises are still waiting." In orbit, Dominion ships adjusted tactics. They launched swarms of mechanized drones, engineered for planetary assault. But as the drones entered Earth's atmosphere, they encountered anomalies, unpredictable storm systems that shouldn't exist, interference fields that bent their guidance systems. Hidden human installations on the ground unleashed artillery, magnetic rail systems that fired projectors at impossible velocities. Swarms of drones disintegrated before reaching their targets. On the ground in San Diego, civilians watched the sky light up with explosions. But instead of fear, bar patios and rooftops erupted with cheers. On one large outdoor screen, a news anchor calmly narrated, "And once again, the invading drones have been intercepted. Local authorities request that citizens refrain from attempting to record with drones of their own to avoid signal interference." A group of college students clinked glasses. One of them lifted his phone, showing the text that had gone viral. "That's adorable." Meanwhile, in low orbit, Dominion commandants grew restless. They anticipated our tactics, Van Admiral hissed. The Supreme Warlord stared at the projections, watching as human countermeasures adapted faster than predicted. A different approach was needed. He issued new commands. The fleet would descend. Direct planetary insertion. Boots on the ground. The plan was simple: overwhelm Earth's defenses with sheer numbers and subjugate its cities. Drop pods, like fiery rain, began to streak through the atmosphere. From Alaska to New Zealand, thousands of them roared toward the surface. But the humans had been preparing for this moment. Aorbiter defense stations fired precision rail busts, splitting many pods. Those that made it through found themselves landing not in peaceful fields or defenseless cities, but inside designated kill zones. In the Nevada desert, enormous decoy structures concealed, mines and automated turrets. Pods slammed into what appeared to be salt flats, only for entire sections of ground to collapse beneath them, dragging Dominion troops into subterranean traps. In urban centers, human forces used guerrilla tactics perfected over centuries of conflict. Dominion soldiers encountered not panicked civilians, but coordinated strike teams armed with drones and even improvised electromagnetic disruptors. On the ground in Paris, Dominion shock troops marched through the streets, until human resistance cells triggered EMP charges embedded in streetlights and sewer grates, rendering their weapons useless. Resistance fighters emerged from beneath the cobblestones, ancient city tunnels allowing them to outmaneuver the invaders. In Tokyo, Dominion troops found themselves lost in labyrinthine alleys as coordinated teams misdirected them with false signals and hacked visual feeds. In the Dominion fleet's command center, alarms blared. Reports from the surface flooded in, unexpected human resistance, and unacceptable losses. The supreme warlord clenched his fists. He had faced defiance before, but never an enemy who seemed to treat invasion as sport. The worst part wasn't just the efficiency, it was the audacity. Intercepted transmissions from human forces were filled with banter, jokes, and even celebratory cheers. When the Dominion scout had relayed a message, human soldiers raising cans of beer before launching counterattacks. In the heart of Washington, D.C., President Roe addressed her war council. They thought fear would break us, she said calmly. Instead, it reminded us who we are. Reports continued to come in, Dominion soldiers retreating from skirmishes they thought unwinnable. The world had unified in a way never before seen. Every human effort, from the smallest engineering hack to the most daring battlefield maneuver, carried the same spirit, defiance laced with humor. In space, Dominion ships began to pull back, their formations losing cohesion. On board the flagship, the Supreme Warlord realized something terrifying. This wasn't just resistance. This was a species that thrived on being challenged. Every tactic thrown at them became another puzzle to solve, another opportunity to prove impossible odds weren't barriers but invitations. And their response, echoing across every intercepted signal, was clear: that's adorable. The Dominion ground forces found themselves in chaos. What was supposed to be a swift subjugation turned into a surreal nightmare. They had trained for hostile environments, unpredictable enemies, and fierce resistance. But they had not prepared for humanity's sheer unpredictability, for the creativity born from stubbornness and the absurdity of humor in the face of annihilation. On the outskirts of Berlin, Dominion squads advanced cautiously down tight alleys. Their scanners detected, but they couldn't lock on. Then, without warning, music filled the air, loud, defiant rock riffs blaring from hidden speakers. Moments later, smoke grenades flooded the street in neon colors. Human fighters, wearing motorcycle helmets painted with cartoon faces, burst from hidden doors, wielding makeshift energy disruptors built from scavenged Dominion tech. The aliens fired, but the human assault was relentless. They fought not with fear, but with almost gleeful defiance. Some shouted sarcastic battle cries, when soldier hurled a device while yelling, "This one's for science." It detonated in a cascade of electromagnetic pulses, disabling Dominion hover units. Cameras broadcast the scenes live to millions worldwide. Crowds cheered as though watching a sporting event. In Sydney's harbour, Dominion war walkers strode through shallow water stirred the city centre. The water suddenly exploded around them as human submarines, disguised as cargo vessels, launched magnetic torpedoes that clamped onto walker legs and their systems. From the rooftops, civilians, unarmed but undeterred, waved large banners that read "Nice try." Inside a Dominion command post hastily established in New Delhi, alien commandants reviewed battlefield footage with growing confusion and frustration. On one screen, human firefighters were shown rescuing Dominion soldiers trapped in rubble after a failed bombardment, only to send them back into battle after patching them up with a slap on the back and a muttered, "Give it another go." On another, Dominion patrols were misled by fake road signs and false transmissions that led them in circles for hours. One of the alien generals hissed, "They're playing with us." In the dense jungles of the Amazon, Dominion scouting parties disappeared van by van. The survivors told bizarre tales, traps that involved banana peels and gravity mines, holographic predators that never existed, and human warriors who appeared out of the foliage, saluted ironically, and vanished without a trace. In orbit, Dominion analysts scrambled to make sense of it all. Their predictive algorithms failed repeatedly. When artificial intelligence attempted to explain the phenomenon but ultimately displayed the message, "Error, incalculable anomaly." On the battlefield near Cairo, Sergeant Helena Voss led her unit straight into a Dominion encampment. But instead of attacking, they unloaded crates filled with cold beverages and a note that read, "Thought you could use a break." As the bewildered aliens stared at the humans retreating without firing a shot, their camp's entire data system crashed, courtesy of a timed virus hidden in the crates. Vasa's voice crackled over open comms, filled with laughter, cheers. All around the globe, the pattern repeated. Dominion commandants became increasingly paranoid, expecting attacks from every direction, and often from the most ridiculous sources. In Montreal, teenagers took down Dominion drones using modified snowball cannons. In Nairobi, street performers staged distracting flash mobs that lured Dominion squads into ambushes. In rural areas, Dominion landing parties were met by farmers with pitchforks, standing shoulder to shoulder with military personnel in. The psychological toll mounted. Dominion soldiers became hesitant, every move, jumping at shadows. Their morale eroded rapidly in the face of an enemy that refused to take the invasion seriously, but still won, battle after battle. They didn't just fight, they mocked. And the world watched. The viral trended across every human platform. On the Dominion flagship, the supreme warlord's rage turned to fear. Reports poured in of units refusing to continue. Not out of cowardice, but bewilderment. Their pride had been turned against them, their superiority mocked and dismantled with creativity they couldn't match. Intercepted transmissions showed human troops singing while storming enemy lines or pausing to sip coffee. In a desperate move, the Dominion attempted to broadcast a final ultimatum: surrender or face annihilation. But their message was intercepted, altered, and rebroadcast globally with a remix soundtrack and the caption, "Bless your heart." Billions of humans left. On the ground in London, Dominion forces made one last push toward the city center. But as they turned a corner, they were met not by soldiers, but by a full brass band, playing an upbeat, celebratory march. Human troops flanked the band and launched their counterattack with confetti grenades leading the charge. The aliens broke ranks. The retreat began in chaos. Across Earth, Dominion forces fled, pursued by soldiers still cracking jokes. In the skies, Dominion ships ignited their engines in panic. The invasion was over, not just defeated, but humiliated. And humanity's final message, broadcast across every Dominion channel, was simple and impossible to misunderstand. Come back when you're ready. We'll keep the beer cold. The Dominion fleet limped away from Earth's orbit, leaving behind the broken fragments of pride and machinery scattered across the world. On the surface, humanity was not celebrating with reckless abandon but with the quiet satisfaction of a species that had not only survived but turned the tables in the most unexpected ways. The war rooms around the world, once frantic centers of tension, were now filled with exhausted laughter and clinking coffee mugs. On a global broadcast, images of retreating alien dreadnoughts filled every screen. But humanity wasn't done. In Geneva, the newly formed Earth Unity Council convened, comprised of generals, scientists, diplomats, and, most importantly, civilians, artists, comedians, teachers, construction workers. All of them had contributed to the effort. A holographic display projected the Dominion's fleet trajectory retreating to the outer edges of the system. President Alvarez of the council looked at the room and said, with a grin, "They'll be telling bedtime horror stories about us for generations." In low orbit, the International Space Station had become a beacon of unity. Converted into a diplomatic outpost, it was broadcasting a single repeating message into the void. To those who challenged Earth, that was adorable. Let's talk. The transmission was playful, but underneath it lay an iron resolve. Ships from all nations, still bearing scorch marks and field repairs, patrolled calmly, their presence a reminder that humanity's defense was not only military might but imagination without limits. On the outskirts of Nairobi, Dominion prisoners sat in a large camp, not behind electrified fences but gathered around open fires, watched by relaxed guards sharing food and stories. Van Alien, scaled and towering, cautiously sipped a human drink handed to him. "What is this?" he asked in broken English. A young sergeant grinned. "Lemonade. Sweet, sour, and predictable. Like us." The alien blinked slowly and then nodded in reluctant respect. In New York's Times Square, giant screens replayed footage of the final confrontation. Dominion ships retreating, chased by squadrons of human fighter jets releasing streams of harmless but brightly colored paint, coating the alien hulls in neon streaks as they fled. The crowd laughed again every time, and street vendors sold foam versions of the Dominion helmets, now painted with smiley faces. Back in A-orbit, the Dominion's last transmission crackled across frequencies. "We will return." The human response came not from a government official or a military leader but from Jace Holloway, now known worldwide for his stand-up broadcast. Sitting in a simple chair, wearing a patched military jacket and sunglasses, he leaned toward the camera. "Please do. We're working on new material." His wink became an instant meme. At the same moment, in the Dominion High Command ship, silence reigned. Generals reviewed footage of their forces routed by what they now classified as tactical chaos operations. Their neural AI advisors displayed only error codes. The Supreme Warlord gazed at the frozen image of humans dancing on the battlefield, confetti streaming down, fireworks replacing missiles, and simply whispered, "They didn't just fight, they played." When advisor dared to speak, "Warlord, they weaponized culture." In Tokyo, children drew pictures on large walls, depicting Dominion ships painted in rainbows, human soldiers clinking beer cans with confused aliens, and big letters reading, "Better luck next time." Parents encouraged them, knowing these images would be broadcast on every surviving Dominion channel in the galaxy, courtesy of hacked satellites. A ceremony was held in Paris, not of victory, but of gratitude. Names of fallen soldiers, human and alien alike, scrolled across towering holographic arches. Representatives of surviving Dominion troops attended, standing stiffly, and certain of the human customs. But when the crowd offered them solemn nods of respect instead of scorn, their posture softened. Commandant, speaking through a translator, said with genuine humility, "We came to conquer. You answered with wisdom and madness. We leave defeated but enlightened." Finally, from the farthest outpost on Mars, Earth's last message to the retreating fleet was sent. A simple, short video, footage of children laughing, soldiers planting gardens in bomb craters, people of all cultures dancing together, and a final banner unfurled by a group of veterans. "You challenged Earth. We challenged logic. Next time, bring snacks." The signal ended with the phrase, "That's adorable." Across Dominion worlds, the footage spread like wildfire. Military academies treated it as a cautionary tale. Cultural leaders studied it, attempting to comprehend the human capacity for defiance through absurdity. And the common citizens of those worlds? They laughed. Nervously at first, then genuinely. Humanity had done more than repel an invasion. It had made an entire galactic empire question the meaning of strength. And on Earth, with the skies clear and the threat gone, when truth settled in everyone's hearts, humanity's greatest weapon wasn't firepower. It was creativity, irreverence, and an unshakable spirit. The galaxy would never look at Earth the same way again.